Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who Classic, we had the Aztecs. What all happened in that one?
Well, that was my favorite so far. I'll be honest with you, I don't really remember it that well from 50 years ago, but they land there in the Aztec kingdom there in central Mexico, and they learn that you literally cannot mess with the past, because if you do, it will cause all sorts of problems. Barbara wants to try to stop them from their practice of human sacrifice, but does not manage to do that. Other than that, there's some wonderful characters in there. Can't remember the bad guy's name, but just a real slimy, almost Richard III Shakespearean type of character. And of course, then there's the good. I don't know if he was a priest or something, the one who kind of understood what Barbara and Ian and the doctor and Susan were doing. And anyway, it just ended up as a really nice, very well-written, excellent sets and brilliant costumes all the way around. Just had a great deal of fun with it.
Yep. And then at the end there, we were headed back into space. It seems that they landed, but they are still moving, which that was the tease going into the next episode, which is what we are on today.
The Sensorites, is that what it is?
Something like that.
Looks like yeah.
We'll be watching the first 3 episodes of this today, and then next week we will do the next 3, and I guess that's pretty much that.
And then can't wait for the landing in the French Revolution, the Reign of Terror. I again vaguely remember that one from 50 years ago. Of course, I was always more into the historical stuff than the outer space and the bug-eyed monster stuff.
Yeah.
Except for the Daleks, of course.
Right. And even then, those could be trimmed down a little bit, but yeah, I guess that is pretty much it. We might as well get right into this episode. Alrighty.
One of the odd things that came up in my memory, I kind of remember the Daleks happening right about the time that the Soviet Union was going through a leadership change. Nikita Khrushchev was out and Leonid Brezhnev was in. And I don't know why that came up, but I kind of remember the Daleks, which would have been, late 63, early 64, somewhere around there. Something happened right in there. So I don't know. I can check that out, or you guys can check it out for us.
Now, I mean, they're going to come back at some point, so you could be remembering something further along the line. So
that could be caused by an unsuppressed motor. Yes, or a magnetic field.
Oh, Ian's changed back into his regular clothes.
Oh, good.
I don't know why we ever bothered to leave the ship.
Last episode, he was in something other than the Marco Polo outfit, at least.
Henry VIII. You know, he threw a parson's nose at me.
Well, what did you do?
Threw it back, of course. Take them to the tower, he said. That's why I did it.
Why? Well, TARDIS was inside the tower.
Of course. That was long before you appeared on the scene. However, now, let us get back to this little problem.
Henry VIII, huh? That's pretty cool.
Checked everything on that? Yes.
Carol, place this against Carol's chest.
I'm sorry. Carol's dead.
Please, do as I ask.
What's really odd, this is right at the beginning of the space age. We would have just barely seen Gagarin and Tereshkova and Glenn have circled the Earth by this time.
What was in that box? Near Westminster Abbey.
Yes. You see, the whole lower half of England is called Central City now. There hasn't been a London for 400 years. We come from the 28th century.
Captain Maitland, these people must leave us immediately.
Central City. It's where the Flash
you will
is.
have to.
But we might be able to help you.
No, Barbara. I learned not to meddle in other people's affairs years ago. Now, don't be absurd. I've an ounce of curiosity in me, my dear boy.
So is it actually a doorknob?
No, it's just the key.
I can smell something burning. Seems to be coming from over here.
You have additional crew.
TARDIS is like 3 feet away, isn't it?
That's what we
You
thought.
must go. Leave us.
Gracious, they've taken the lock.
It's not so much the lock, it's the opening mechanism. The door's permanently locked.
Permanently?
Okay.
Another way to keep them out for 6 episodes.
To break down the door?
Why couldn't I do it?
It's also fascinating to see radio tubes still being used. Of course, in the early 60s, that's what they would have had. That's, the lunar lander in 69 had less computational power than the average hand calculator today.
I suppose she meant the water was through this door. Let's try it.
That's a hand without a glove.
Yeah. They really missed that giant sign that said water.
I also remember back in the early 60s that electronic eye, that sensor eye, was brand new. I mean, seriously, when we go to the grocery store, a lot of times I just stand out and pass in front of the door to open and close it. Barbara should punch him. He's obviously slow moving.
See, that's the thing. They're not locked in there with him. He's locked in there with her. That's the difference.
Where's the power come from?
Electromagnetics. We should be to the locks very soon.
Early Dremel drill.
What about Barbara and Susan?
There's no time now.
I bet the doctor was thinking, if you had this, like sonic and like a screwdriver that could work, maybe he's starting to get ideas.
Look out there. Now remember, all of you, no violence unless the Sensorites start it first.
Why no violence? Surely we've got the right to protect ourselves.
My dear Cheston, it's our minds that they take over.
Cheston?
So we...
Doctor.
They're gremlins.
I mean, it was a little spooky, actually. That's part one.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah. Set was really nice for one of their space episodes.
And again, for 1964, I mean, it's amazing because, we have currently the International Space Station. You've been to the moon 4 or 5 times, all this other stuff. But seriously, you have to remember, I still have a set of World Book encyclopedias that my family bought when I was 8 years old. It's from 1959. And if you open up the book that has S for space travel, literally the first paragraph says, when we are finally able to go into space, this is what we expect. And this is basically what they were thinking about. Those first couple of flights from the United States, Alan Shepard and... I want to say Bean, but don't quote me on that. They were suborbital flights. I mean, these were guys who basically were shot up into the lower part of the, I can't remember what it's called. It's not the stratosphere, I don't think, but basically to just enjoy weightlessness for a couple of minutes, and they came back down. Again, 63, I think, was John Glenn. He made only 3 orbits around the Earth, so this is right about that time. So this is kind of ahead of where we actually were, but very, very similar to what late 50s and early 60s. Again, the set is somewhat reminiscent of Forbidden Planet and the kind of stuff they did. So very well done so far. I'm enjoying it. And again, well written. Doesn't seem to be any real lag time in there.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting because this is the first time, we've had our episodes where, we go to the future. We went to Skaro with the Daleks, or we went to Marinus and stuff. But this is the first time we are just on a spaceship in space. They actually haven't done that other than the TARDIS itself.
Yeah.
So it is actually kind of interesting, looking at this, I could see how, this would be the beginnings of, the Enterprise set or something, which would only just be a couple years later. So, and that little space dude at the end there, I could see him on an episode of the original series, the original Star Trek series. So I'm still waiting for, every moment where Barbara and Susan were just sort of looking at John. I was just waiting for any hint that she was just going to hit him. It's like, okay, he's on the ground, knee him in the face, something.
Steady, Chesterton. The calmer you are, the stronger.
I mean, the last time they really saw an alien was the Daleks. And even that would really just look like a robot.
Nobody's arguing about that.
Like that man John's with them.
The Sensorites have control over John's mind. They may force him to obey their orders.
Her hair is different.
How's it coming?
Slowly, but it's
It
working.
used to be just a bun cake, now it's just an entire
The
bun.
other side of this door.
Interesting.
All right. We must both concentrate very hard. Ready?
Yes. 5.
That actually worked.
That's it. It's going. Oh. Yes, it might be possible for...
You're right. Her hair is different.
Yeah.
Because you were strong-willed and without fear, they didn't harm you.
Susan is without fear. That's
Resting
new.
now. Did you know his hair was almost white?
There's nothing wrong with that.
In a man of 30, Doctor? And he looks so old. Why have the Sensorites done this? What do they want from us?
Oh, that's intentional.
John muttered something just now before he passed
I was curious why Carol was engaged to an older man.
If they try to attack us with force, we are to summon our warriors to destroy them.
This is John's spectroscope, Doctor.
So I see.
The beard is an interesting touch.
Yeah.
beginning to take a reading of the minerals in the vicinity.
And I love the way
Well, that was the first time.
the head is put so high up on them that it makes their necks look like they're a foot long.
Yeah.
Very much.
They're here! On the ship!
Come on, Barbara. Let's find them.
Pick up a crowbar or something, Ian.
Yeah. I mean, his hands aren't registered weapons like Barbara's are. You can tell it's really early with the technology of sensing because they always have to do it like so awkwardly.
Again, I like the fact that the sets are dark and not, shiny like a lot of other stuff from the 50s and 60s.
Nonsense.
You know, this is... definitely what you'd call a working type ship.
Yeah.
On their gaze, they're shorter than Ian and Barbara.
Well, their eye level is. Oh, there you go. I mean, technically, Ian is a trained warrior by the Aztecs, so... Did they get shorter?
No, I think it was the angle of where the camera was.
Okay.
The Sensorites want to know if it's all right for them to talk to you.
Are you saying that you're
You say you've made contact with them?
Yes.
That was my line.
Well, of course we shall see them. But they must agree not to harm us. If they try to harm us, then I shall fight them.
I want to see that.
Grandfather, it was the only way. They knew I'd agree.
Agree? To what?
To go down with them to their planet. Otherwise, we'll all be killed.
And now they have a hostage. And we've also established now that the Doctor is telepathic. To an extent.
To an extent, yes. Now, is that something that they really do in New Who?
To an extent. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, not as fast-paced as the first one, but again, a lot of exposition that they needed to get out of the way.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I gotta say, again, the alien creatures are very well done. They're spooky without being incredibly frightening. I mean, obviously they've got the lily pad feet, which is
Yeah.
kind of funny. But again, they're just strange enough to be, I'm sure, to, children who are watching, that they would be, spooky and creepy enough. But, again, the fact that they, I don't want to say they have that, E.T. look about them, but they do have a somewhat benign appearance because they don't have, claws and teeth and stuff like that. So it seems to be, exactly what, again, whatever the costume designer or director was looking for, something that is alien and creepy without being incredibly frightening.
Yeah. It was also interesting to see, like, the Doctor, like, get a little angry. And not in the normal way that this one does, where he's grumpy or cranky or anything, but when he's legitimately threatening. Because a lot of the modern Doctors do that really well. It's like, yeah, when the Doctor gets mad, that is not a good place to be. So it's nice to actually get that from the first Doctor, with him threatening, and wanting the lock of the TARDIS back.
Yeah.
So.
Putting us all in danger.
If you go with them, they will have all the advantage.
But they only want to talk to me.
I'm sorry, Susan, but I don't believe you have the ability to represent us, that's all.
Stop treating me like a child.
You will do as you're told, Susan. Come here.
Well, I have opinions too.
My dear girl, the one purpose in growing old is to accumulate knowledge and wisdom, and to help other people.
So I'm to be treated like a silly little child.
If you behave like one, yes.
I understand Susan not wanting to be treated like a child, but
Oh, it's all right, John. I'm here.
you also understand the Doctor. They need to discuss.
I can hear them.
I know.
In here.
Granted, the Doctor's probably also thinking, no, I don't need you making decisions. I'm trying to have Ian and Barbara stop making decisions without me.
John.
Ever since that day of the explosion in the sky, our people have been dying in greater numbers every year.
Yes, some kind of disease, I imagine, Chesterton. Maybe.
Could be simple as scarlet fever.
Like Cortez and the Aztecs.
To visit your planet?
These creatures, these Earth people, are loud and ugly things. Why could we not have met them in the desert or in the mountains? That is why I have beamed the disintegrator to this room.
Without permission?
You are presumptuous. I am this city's administrator. It is my duty to protect the one who rules. Can you say that these Earth creatures will not use force?
Trust in the Lord, but keep your gunpowder
I am
dry.
only guarding the first.
That you will do nothing further until I have considered the matter.
Very subtle markings on their
I shall not
uniforms.
wait. He thought of a fleet of spaceships to come here and mine the metal and transport it back to his own planet. We saw the pictures he formed in his mind, and we saw that it was the end of our way of life.
I hope you won't be offended if I drink some. Very thirsty.
As long as you taste of the crystal water, it is very fine. None of the elders drink anything else. Vintage water.
Fruit is delicious. It tastes like peaches.
Oops.
The disease is invisible and resists all our attempts to stamp it out. It hits all manner of people, irrespective of their caste. Yes, does it affect the elders? No. I wonder why not.
The water.
I cannot imagine. We have been fortunate. Yes, it might be a clue. But what I hope, sir...
Because Ian
was
drank
this,
the original water.
Yeah.
That... Is this a symptom? Your disease?
Grandfather, he's unconscious.
There is no hope. Your friend is dying.
Once again, nice little cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But again,
Alrighty.
you and I, who are adults, figured that out rather quickly, whereas I would think as a 12-year-old I might not have noticed the difference that
Yeah.
the elders who don't get the disease drank the crystal water from the mountains. Everybody else who does get the disease drinks the somewhat supposedly clarified water, but obviously there's some major difference there.
Yep. Alrighty, so that's parts 1 through 3 of this one.
Well, I'm pleasantly surprised. Again, it's a good script. Again, first scene had way more action. The first episode had way more action, but it's a good story. It's keeping up. It doesn't seem to drag too bad. So far, I'm impressed.
Yeah. And I was kind of wondering, like, okay, how are we going to keep this going for another 3 episodes after this? Like, oh, okay, so we have the disease, we have this place is Tagana. There's always some Tagana everywhere.
So you have to have an antagonist.
Yeah,
I mean, that's part of the problem. Is that if you don't have the protagonists and the antagonists, then there's no storyline.
That's true, but it's always like the second in command, like Tagana was in Marco Polo. So, but it works.
Yeah,
it still works.
Yeah.
We can go ahead and hop into the notes here. The first thing I wrote down was the heart. That way that they control them, and it's not that it stops the heart, but it must slow them down or something.
Yeah, puts them into a suspended animation.
Yeah, and they have that device, which, how do they wake up and use that device without someone else being there to do it for them?
Yeah, well, they had said that they had been asleep for quite some time, so maybe since John had been incapacitated, maybe they hadn't woken up.
Yeah.
So, we don't really know. Again, it was kind of a minor point, but and maybe the aliens come in and do it to them.
That's true, because they also said, like, sometimes they'll even come in and feed them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it could be that. We are in the 28th century, and this is actually Earth's future. Before it was, well, we're on Skaro with the Thals and the Daleks, and then, well, we're on Marinus, and it's like, well, no, these are actual humans. This is in Earth's future, which, yeah, this is a first for the show.
And now, this may be going way deeper than what the writer intended, but what I'm sensing so far in this is something that we were confronting, although it really kind of started in the 40s, right after World War II, but going through the 50s and 60s, and that's that idea of, for want of a better word, colonialism. How Great Britain, for example, had gone into India and had exploited the system there, and where you had the British on top and the various, they use the word castes, the various levels of society there. But also, Germany and Italy and Africa and Belgium in Africa and places like that. And so what they're doing here is they're kind of projecting this image of the indigenous people who are basically saying, we really don't want to have to fight you, but you cannot come in and continue to take our resources and things like that. And again, in that last episode, especially with the Supreme Commander, whatever he was there, the Elder, I almost got kind of an idea of Mahatma Gandhi. That here is, we don't want to harm you. This is, I don't want to say passive resistance, but we cannot allow you to come in and do these things, and therefore we will do whatever we can to prevent you from doing that, short of actually creating violence. So
yeah.
there may be a kind of an anti-colonialism type thing going on here.
It's kind of like, because nothing has happened yet. John just had the idea to come in and mine molybdenum. Yeah. I tried to write that down. It's like it just sounds like they're sneezing every time they say that. But yeah, it's like he's only had the idea. It's almost that, well, nothing has happened yet, but they are cutting it off at the source, basically, before it becomes a huge problem. And yeah, the entire place becomes a colony and is completely mined of all resources. Yeah. So yeah, I could see that sort of a parallel. I did write down the Sensorites. They are an interesting design. Yeah. And I guess, it's sort of in the same vein as the Vors from Marinus, although I don't know, there's something about these, I guess, because that seemed to be what they had, this giant sort of mask thing. We never really get to see them, I don't feel like. Yeah. Whereas no, this is what they look like with their strange, kind of looks like a gremlin or something, but these huge beards that sort of wrap around, which is also very weird. So,
and again, the end of the first episode, the little creature that appeared there for 2 or 3 seconds in the porthole did not at all appear to look like what we saw in the succeeding 2 episodes.
Yeah, it could have been like, because they did refilm that scene for the beginning of episode 2. It could have been like that was just the prototype that they had created, and then the next week they were ready with the final designs, basically. Yeah. So,
maybe what was the producer, not Verity, but her boss, said, I'm sorry, that looks too much like a bug-eyed monster, and they went back and redesigned it. But yeah, this is even moving into almost like the civil rights movement in Great Britain and Europe and the United States during this time period, where you have a group of people, not specifically that they have resources or anything, but a group of people who are simply being used as workers because the upper class, as it were, says, but that's all they're good for. In the actual 1960s, they don't have the education or they don't have the skills or whatever, and so we have to use them as manual laborers and things like that. So there's kind of a hint of that in here too. So I'm very interested to see where they go in the next 3 episodes with this.
Yeah. The next thing I wrote down was locked out. The fact that they took the entire lock and opening mechanism of the TARDIS. Because that's the thing with this show. It is rare when there is actually an episode where they do have full access to the TARDIS, and then it's like, okay, well, the plot is written in such a way that the Doctor has to stay there and keep doing it, but he can use the TARDIS to help out.
Well, let's see. Now we've had the cavemen. Was there a reason why they couldn't get back into it in the cavemen? I don't remember.
I think they were held prisoner by the cavemen. Okay. It wasn't specifically.
And then we had the 2 episodes on the TARDIS, and so that wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
The Daleks was after that.
Well, the Daleks came first.
Oh, Daleks came.
So it was cavemen, then the Daleks, and
they had something burn out.
Yeah, they had to go find something, basically.
Right. And then what came after the Daleks and the...
that was Marco Polo.
That was Marco. So right. So yeah, there's something in every episode that keeps them from getting back.
The force field on Marinus, the tomb door, and the Aztecs. There is always something, but here it is way more obvious that it's like, oh well, here's the next thing that will get rid of the TARDIS for this episode. Because now, granted, the TARDIS doesn't really help with anything, but the Doctor is much more willing to leave at this point in his life. If this was any of the more modern Doctors, walk in, you see 2 dead people, the Doctor is going to try to find out what happened here, whereas this Doctor is more like, well, they're dead, what can we do? So let's get back in the TARDIS, maybe we'll hit London this time. So, which they also did mention is that they are still trying to make it back to London in 1963. It's just that the Doctor has the most terrible aim and just cannot get there. So it makes me curious if I have to imagine that at some point we will get back to 1963 in London, but at that point, are we going to be leaving Ian and Barbara? That would be my only question. Or maybe we get back there and then, just so happens it's fixed. Now we can choose where we go, and then we keep Ian and Barbara. So, yeah. I don't know.
All right, what else we got here?
I wrote down John. So I'm glad they explained there was a reason why he looked older. Because I was thinking, okay, why is Carol engaged to someone who does look a considerable amount older than her? It's like, oh, okay, I guess it's just a side effect of what they did to him after his mind was opened up.
Yeah.
So, and
that'll be interesting to see that once they cure him, does he go back to looking normal, or will he keep his white hair and his... it's pretty obvious, that he had the bags under his eyes and everything. That was really good makeup. So we'll see, will he keep that and simply be, more alive in spirit, as it were, or is he going to, still be somewhat of a shuffling old man?
Yeah. And I will say, when they were like, oh, this isn't good that, Barbara and Susan are in there and John's in there, it's like, well, he might become violent. It's like, well, he wasn't. And he was moving so slowly, he really didn't seem like he would have been that much of a threat.
Yeah.
And I know that it's our joke that we are projecting onto the show that Barbara is the warrior of the group. But still.
Yeah.
I get it. That is our joke that we have projected onto the show, but I keep expecting it. It's like there's 8 different ways. Even when he was breaking down and he was crying and she was comforting him, I was like, snap his neck. I don't know. But
no, that's the teacher in her. That's she's not really a mother, but that's her maternal instincts kicking in.
Which, I mean, yeah, the sort of comforting the person, the teacher or maternal instinct. Honestly, you could almost say that both Ian and Barbara have developed that, and especially with Susan.
Yeah.
So, I wrote down, "We defy you." That was interesting that actually did work, and I guess it was that it's the fact that the Sensorites are sort of taking in all these thoughts that they can get their thoughts in. You also have to wonder if maybe Susan is also slightly telepathic, because the doctor is, so it would make sense.
And if she is in fact his biological granddaughter, she would, you would assume, have some of that genetic material in her that would give her that ability.
Yeah, although, so the Time Lords keep getting weird because we made a joke last episode about if you cut out the doctor's heart, well, he's got 2 of them, so you gotta really get in there and get both of them. And someone explained that apparently the 2 hearts is a result of regeneration. So at this point, the first Doctor only has 1 heart, and once he regenerates, he then has 2 hearts from then on.
Oh.
Granted, all of this is retcon because none of this has been established. There's no lore in this show yet.
Yeah.
It will be very interesting to see, when does the lore of this show start? Like, when do they think, we should probably explain the Doctor in some capacity. The only thing I could think is that they wouldn't have to do it until the first regeneration.
Yeah. Now, twice, though, he has now mentioned other journeys. He talked about getting into a spat with Henry VIII, and what was the other one? A couple of episodes back, he talked about, maybe it was with Marco Polo, and Marco said, "Did you read about that?" And he said, "No, I met the guy."
Yeah.
Who was that?
I think that was in Marinus, but I don't remember. Yeah, it was something like that, where it's like, oh, you should have read this guy. And it's like, well, it's a good thing you did. Read? No, I met the guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, so they are building, just little hints that he has been other places and he has done other stuff. And Susan talked about something else, some other journeys that they had been on before they had made it there to London. So
yeah, it seems like they went on adventures, and if you want to then take the canon that they established much later, it's like, okay, so the Doctor steals the TARDIS with Susan. They go off, have some adventures, and then they decide to stop in London, and Susan goes to high school. I don't see the advantage of that, but that's what ends up happening, and that's how they meet Ian and Barbara.
Again, whatever they're stopped for, whether the Doctor's repairing the TARDIS or just needs to take a rest or something, you can't have a teenager. Now, if she ever left the TARDIS and just walked around the streets of London, somebody would say, "Young lady, why aren't you in school?" I mean, they do have truancy laws and things like that. So in order to, shall we say, keep up appearances, they decide to send her to the local school until such time as they can take off.
Yeah.
Although, didn't they also say she was fascinated with Earth?
Yeah.
And wanted to learn a little bit more about it?
Yeah, that is true. That could have been something like that.
Okay,
so
anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that, okay, we have to keep up appearances, so Susan's going to go to high school, but you don't have an actual house for her to go back to, so you miss that part. And I get, only a couple people are ever going to notice that she doesn't actually have a house. But 2 people did notice that. They're Ian and Barbara, and now we're on this adventure. So it's like you kept up the appearance to a fault, basically. Yeah. So,
well, that's what we call serendipity, the happy accident that they just happened to follow her one time and find out she lives in a police call box.
Yeah. And it is good that we are now at a point where Ian and Barbara, it's like, okay, yeah, we're on this sort of adventure with the Doctor and Susan, and we don't know if we're ever going to make it back to London in 1963, but now we're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, because back when they were on Skaro with the Daleks, they were like, how did we get ourselves into this? You know, how did this happen? We're smarter than this, you know? And they were like, man, that Doctor guy, he's so abrasive, and we're stuck on some alien planet. I don't like him. And now we're to the point, it's like, no, we're all good. We're a working unit.
Well, again, I think I would feel the same way being a teacher. But when you do a Marco Polo, when you go back to Earth's history and you go, wow, you know, these are things that I've read about all my life, and now I'm getting to meet Marco Polo. I'm getting to meet the great Kublai Khan, you know, and the Aztecs. Learning, you know, it's one thing to learn about the Aztecs, but then to realize that you are there while they're about to, you know, cut somebody's heart and guts out to appease the great sun god or whatever, then you realize, you know, I can't stand by and let that happen. I know that's what the history books say, but, you know, it seems more immediate when you're right there. I mean, it would be the same way with the Greeks or the Romans or, you know, the Mesopotamians or whoever. And I'm sure at some point that we will get into all of these, you know, ancient civilizations to say we are trying not to judge them from a 20th century standpoint, but you can't really help that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I try to teach my history students is when you look at some of the things that happened in the United States of America in the 1800s towards the Native Americans, you know, because I teach Oklahoma history, that you have to understand, we would never do that, but then we didn't live in that time period. We didn't understand the whole idea of manifest destiny, how we were the greatest country in the world because we supposedly had beat the British twice now. And I try to tell my students, you need to understand, we did not beat the British. They kicked our butts during the Revolutionary War. They kicked our butts even worse during the War of 1812. But in each instance, the reason why those two wars came to an end is because it was literally simply too expensive. The British said, we will wreck our own economy if we continue to fight the Americans. They're just not worth it. Cut them loose. Give them what they want and cut them loose. But from the American side, you're looking at the people who beat the Spanish, you know, the Spanish Armada and all that, and you're thinking, well, if we beat the British, doesn't that make us the greatest people in the world? And that hubris, for lack of a better word, is what prompted Manifest Destiny and killing thousands, if not millions, of Native Americans and Spanish and British and French and all the rest of those people while we were trying to fulfill that particular mission of, you know, spreading democracy from coast to coast. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, getting too involved here. Let's move on.
Yeah, the next thing would be molybdenum. Molybdenum. All right. Could have found a better element or metal or anything.
But again, late 50s, early 60s, when we first began putting computers together, they take an enormous amount of electricity, energy to keep them going, and they take a lot of what we call rare earth minerals. You know, we need superconducting metals. We were trying all this sort of stuff. We ultimately found out that one of the literally most worthless minerals in the world, gold, you know, gold by itself as a mineral is totally worthless because it is so malleable. It's totally useless, literally as a metal, but it is a conductor of electricity. So that's why there's a lot of gold wiring inside of computers and things like that. Molybdenum, being that it was so resistant to heat and melting, would become one of those things that, yes, every technology, every advance in technology during this time period would be furthered by having bigger and better computing abilities, and molybdenum, I can't even say it now, molybdenum and other materials would be needed to do that. So this is something that, again, in the 1960s, if we had found molybdenum in South America or in Australia or in Asia or Africa, you can bet that all the advanced countries in the world would be exploiting the natives in those areas in order to try to get that.
Yeah. Let's see. I did write down Susan being treated like a child. So I get it. I get her argument. It is interesting that the doctor says, like, no, you can't just make decisions on your own without a discussion from all of us, which that's good because it's not just like, well, you can't make decisions. I should be the one making all our decisions because I'm the oldest one here. But you do understand that, well, first off, Susan tried to do something, which, let's be frank, she doesn't do much that often, unless it's like in the last episode where, all right, well, she's not, she was refusing to be, married to this other guy, and, well, that's not helping, play the part and everything. So yeah, I guess maybe this is sort of a continuation from that last episode where it's like, okay, well, she is trying to become a bit more independent, but it's sort of a, time and place. This might not be the greatest time to do that. So, and it was very interesting that, it was all three of them that were saying, like, no, you can't just go with them, even if they trust you, it's not a good idea basically to be the hostage. So,
but I think, obviously, other than the writers trying to, give Susan more of a character, this, I think, also goes back to that episode on the TARDIS where the Doctor finally says, I need to understand that Ian and Barbara, you do bring something to the conversation. You do need to understand, yes, I am in charge of the TARDIS, but I will do my best to try to listen to you, and I'll try not to be, such a, grump about it. And I think they're trying to develop that here, where he cannot simply treat her as a child anymore, but she has to understand there are limits, especially in, again, very precarious situations like this, where she cannot just take it upon herself to do that. So,
right.
Yeah. So I thought it was a nice little character development, both for her, and I'm sure at some point in the next 3 episodes, we'll see the Doctor not necessarily apologize to her, but say, I understand what you're going through, and I'll try to be more sensitive to that.
Right. And, of course, we've said this before, that, well, if the Doctor ever apologizes for something, he will always swing it back around to him being right. And, yeah, and especially I can see that happening with this Doctor, too. So,
well, I used to tell my students, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong.
Yeah. We did have the meeting with the Sensorites on the planet, which was pretty interesting, and seeing sort of their high council, and luckily that they were all, distinguishable from each other just by the different markings and stuff.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Again, that was very clever of them. I thought, I mentioned that when we were doing that, is that it's not military, but there is a very specific way that you can recognize, and the Supreme Leader said, I have the 2 sashes, my second in command has the 1, you got the guy with the collar who is the city administrator, and you got the people with the, hash marks on their sleeves, and then people with nothing. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how their society deliberately ranks people by their appearance, which again may be a throwback to, what was happening there in the late 50s and 60s. You had the adults who were, wearing still the button-down 3-piece suits and shirts and all that sort of stuff, and the kids who were beginning to grow their hair long and, not wear a tie and wearing all sorts of, beads and long hair and stuff like that. So, I don't know. It's a very subtle callback to that sort of thing that was happening right at that time in 64.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing to talk about is the ending, where we immediately guessed that the disease must come from the not as good water, and that's what's affecting Ian here.
Yeah.
Which, it is one of those things where it's like, you almost feel like the Doctor should have got that immediately. It's like, okay, so you have these diseases, and you drink separate water, but the elders are fine, and they drink this particular water. And then Ian, starts coughing and everything. Is like, well, he had the not as good water. It's like, oh, well, there it is.
Well, I think that the Doctor began to put 2 and 2 together. He didn't actually say that yet, but yeah. And it may also be something that, again, like the Europeans coming to the New World, that they brought certain diseases with them that may or may not have been fatal, but given the circumstance of, in this case, the normal water, that may advance what the disease does. Because, after all, Ian is not one of them, but he comes down with the disease. So yeah, it has to do with maybe the water simply enhances a disease that's already within people, or, like you said, it's probably the water itself. But we'll get to that in the next 3 episodes.
Yeah, and that is pretty much all I wrote down for this episode. So, yeah, next time we will watch the next 3 episodes of this one. So, you got anything else?
I'm good.
All right. Well, then, with all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of our Doctor Who classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.